All right, so let's get right down to brass tacks here right away. Reproduction. Do you want to talk a little bit about the concept and how it came to you and what some of your inspirations were when you were writing it?
Okay. Well, the idea first came to me when I was sitting around having breakfast with my girlfriend, and we were reading through a local Calgary paper called the Calgary Sun, and there was this op-ed column where people were talking about this woman who was basically destitute, but she just had her fifth child, and people were writing in to say, oh, this is horrible, this woman's putting a huge strain on her resources. Why should society have to support people like this? And,
Right.
Other people were writing in to agree, and it was a little bit grotesque and kind of gruesome. So I thought, well, what if we went a little bit farther with this idea? And I sort of did a lot of research, and I found out that Alberta was actually one of the very first places to implement a eugenics program. So the Alberta Eugenics Board existed for about 50 years and sterilized around 7,000 people, a lot of times without their families' consent because they were just given the legal right to. So there's a lot of horrifying material that I can draw from right at home here, and I mean obviously there were a lot of sort of pop culture references. I actually referenced the game Half-Life a little bit because there's a bit of a reference in Half-Life due to the fact that everyone's been sterilized and everyone will only be unsterilized as soon as we've conquered our biological urge. But the implication is always that they're just waiting until humanity dies out. So I always thought that topics like that were really interesting. So I just wanted to probe it further.
You mentioned I'm actually a pretty big fan of Half-Life, and it's funny that you should mention that because one of the questions I had for you about the project was the style that it is sort of, it looks like it's shot in and written in, and it seems like it falls not just under the category of science fiction, but the subgenre of like hyper realistic science fiction. And what I mean by that is it looks like, from what I've seen, instead of painting a picture of the future that's, kind of glossy and stylized and dreamlike, it feels like it's dark, it's dystopian, it's real, it's hyper realistic, and I guess it's more Children of Men and less Blade Runner to me. Was this something that you were pursuing while you were writing it and shooting it, or is this something that sort of came out of this concept of the eugenics program being that dark and that close, that having been that close to reality in the first place?
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, Children of Men is a really big influence. I love that film, and it was something that I was certainly thinking about while filming. Unfortunately, I haven't released the whole film, so a bit of the style is lost because you'll notice that there are a lot of shots of people just sort of sitting, staring right at the camera. And I'm a big fan of what's his name, Fog of War, and Yeah, Errol Morris, there we go. I'm a big fan of Errol Morris documentaries, and I'm also a big fan of Children of Men, and, I'm also a big fan of 1984. So the documentary feel of it was really sort of an Errol Morris thing, but obviously I drew a lot of stylistic cues from Children of Men, and I also was sort of drawing from, if you've ever read 1984, or at least some of the newer editions, they include at the very end the Newspeak Dictionary, which is written in past tense. So a lot of people that study the book believe that the regime in 1984 falls because all of any time that they mention Newspeak, it all happens in a past tense. So I thought, well, these events, this eugenics program probably gets started up reasonably soon, so it's not unlike the world that we're living in today. But at the same time, the interviews and the documentary segments of it happen in a future where that's all over. So it sort of addresses two different kinds of narratives. There's the meta-narrative of the entire conflict around the eugenics program, and there's also the very personal narratives that involve two of the characters that are sort of being interviewed about their experience. So it's really sort of weird and multi-pronged. It's hard to do something like that in a short, and I don't think I did the best job in the universe of it. I'd really like to do a feature-length version. So
the other question I had is when it comes to casting for you, how many is the cast for this film sort of a large one, or was it something that you wanted to sort of narrow in, hone in on a few characters and just tell their stories? Because it is kind of hard to tell from the trailer if it's sort of a sprawling mix of stories, or if it just kind of narrows down onto a few people.
Well, casting is always difficult. One, because I'm a procrastinator. I leave things until the last minute, so sometimes I have to, throw my cares to the wind and just pick whoever comes first. But in this case, I mean, I did do some casting, and I do have a lot of experience with the actors in Calgary. And the script didn't call for tons of people. There were some other ideas that I'd had which would have called for more actors, but fortunately, it was sort of on a per-story basis. In one of the stories, I only have 2 actors, and in another story, I have, maybe a good dozen extras plus 2 principals plus, obviously the crew and the other people that I need to get out there. So it certainly wasn't the easiest thing in the universe, but, I had some people helping me out just rounding up extras because I think in the whole film there's only 3 speaking parts. So it's a 10-minute short. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say monologue, but there's certainly a lot of interview segments, and they do take up the majority of the film. So I was really glad that I got both of the actors that I did, because Mark Robson, the guy who's sort of the more, he's the guy that's being interviewed with sort of the blue background. He's actually an RCMP officer, and he just brought a tone to his role that I thought was really unique. So I was really happy to get everyone that I did get. But yeah, it's a pretty small film, so.
We actually, one of the things we did here at Newbury Film Series over the course of this summer is we followed an independent production company located right outside of Boston here, who are currently working on their first feature-length film. And one of the things we've been watching them sort of create as they went along here are these solutions to technical problems that cut down on costs. They, manufacture their own equipment. They sort of figure out these $60, $70 solutions to problems that would ordinarily cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And I'm wondering if there are any instances of these on-the-fly problem-solving moments during the production of your film, and if you could talk for a little bit about some of the hurdles of being an independent filmmaker and some of the hoops that you inevitably have to end up jumping through during the process.
Well, Robert Rodriguez talks about the money hose. If you have problems, you can wash it away with the money hose, right? And I always thought that was funny, but it's totally true, right? So if you're really smart and you have enough time and, you're willing to sit down and really think it through, I think that, some of the most ingenious things have come from filmmaking. Like the Steadicam was invented by, I can't remember what his name is, but, he did it because he didn't want to have to hold a camera on his shoulder, we're problem solvers in film, despite the fact that most people just think that we're like artsy, flippy guys. Whether or not I had to encounter any of those problems, I don't want to say I aimed my sights low, but I wanted to make a story that was relatively simple to tell. I didn't really have big technical issues. Right now I'm sort of trying to make films that I don't want to say aren't too ambitious, but aren't too technically challenging, because I don't want to have to feel like, I really like working with as small a crew as I can. So the less that sort of the technical process gets in the way of the creative process, the happier I am as a director. So, fortunately, I used some pretty standard equipment, just my DVX and a few other little things here and there. But, I didn't really have a whole lot of technical hurdles that I had to overcome with really super creative solutions. But at the same time, there are a lot of challenges being an independent filmmaker. Obviously the first is that, we're all trying to provide for ourselves and work full-time jobs and have personal lives and, work in films. So, the big challenge for me is obviously that there's just so much going on, and we're all so strapped for cash that it's just, I don't know, it's really difficult being a filmmaker, because I guess it's just, we're doing it for the love, and there's really nothing else.
Exactly. There's no, paycheck. Eventually, hopefully, that's what you're aiming for. But for the time being, there's no paycheck waiting for you at the end of this tunnel. It's sort of this is for the love.